do the intro, and then we'll transition in. All right. So,
how's it going, guys? Back live tonight.
Yep. Little hiccup last week. We moved into our new studio and then promptly fell down on our faces and failed. We were going to record rather than going live, and everything that could have gone wrong just went wrong. So we're just going to clip that up into something mildly entertaining at some other point. But
hidden episode.
Yeah, the lost episode, episode 6.
I'm not sure we should clip it up. Be more entertaining.
Well, we'll show it someday. One day when we can afford to show that, we'll we'll do that. But we were talking just before it started about. I read an article last week on what gravity actually is, right? So, from my understanding of the article, and there was the article and then there was the research, right? So the article was pretty high level, so it was understandable even for me. But then I tried to read like the actual like research. No, not happening, right? So the idea is that gravity is the reaction of the collapsing waveform of matter, right? Yeah. That one's up there, right?
Guys, right? Yep.
So when you think about light, right? Light waves, well, light is a photon, right? So light is both a particle and a wave at the same time. The wave, until the waveform collapses, and then it becomes a particle when it's measured, right? It's a really weird, that's the whole weird thing about quantum mechanics, right?
It's honestly beyond me. I'd love to act smart and be like, yeah, no, I get it. I understand what you're saying. I don't know what the fuck you're saying, but I know it's important.
Right. Quantum physics is really one of those things where a lot of it is just a bleeding edge, a frontier of what they're doing in physics right now. So to kind of skip some of the really like out there stuff, we're just gonna go from the 100,000 foot view and look at this thing and kind of play it out from it.
Yeah, I think our viewers will probably thank you for that.
Yeah, totally. So the idea is right. The idea is that all of matter is a waveform, right? So everything that makes up everything else, all the little pieces of everything, right? The molecules, atoms, and it goes farther down into like little
string theory, right?
Elementary particles and stuff like that. So the physical world is that waveform collapsed, right? So the moment that, from moment to moment, the atoms in your body are not going back to being a waveform, right? What's the probability that you will continue to exist as you exist right now, right? And so probability plays into how these waveforms collapse, right? So if the probability of the waveform collapses is more than blah blah blah, right? So then that becomes matter. And it's this really weird far out theory about how gravity exists. And I was right at the edge of like what I could really kind of grasp with this whole article. And so it got me to thinking, how do we decide, right? How do we come to understand really kind of out there stuff like this? Because it's neat to look at this from my perspective. For me, it's neat to look at stuff like that and say, well, what could we do with, how could we play with that, right? And how could we take that little chunk of science and make it kind of take the idea behind it or twist it a little bit and make it fun, right? So I thought, what we could do is that you and I could talk about stuff that's going on now that seems like science fiction that nobody really kind of gets, and you and I can try to understand it, and hopefully in you and I trying to understand it will help other people understand it.
Absolutely. I mean,
and then we'll tell you, and then we'll figure out why we think it's important.
Absolutely. In the gravity thing, I mean, this is there was a guy got hit on the head by an apple once.
Right.
And, we sort of knew that gravity was a thing, but until recently, a lot of the math was theoretical. It was
right. It's always been this kind of weird, like
we couldn't feel it, we couldn't play with it yet.
Yeah, we know it's there, obviously, but we don't. I want to say that people really kind of, like, physicists don't really quite understand why gravity is there.
Yeah.
Because when you break things down into their smallest little bits and pieces, those little bits and pieces don't really have a lot of, they're mostly space. Like, they're mostly open space. They're really mostly nothing. Everything is kind of a little tiny field, right? And then little tiny fields stuck together, and all kind of like little tiny fields stuck together. So where's the thing that makes us heavy, right? Where's the thing that makes it all kind of like...
and gravity is a tremendously limiting law of nature to a sack of flesh.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, this is, people say G forces all the time, and these things that, keep us from going X miles per hour without dying, right? I mean, this is meaning, it could become one of the biggest breakthroughs of our lifetime, in a sense. I mean, breaking this code of gravity, and then being able to replicate, manipulate, erase,
right? Yeah.
When we need to, you could launch a SpaceX rocket into orbit with a zero gravity field around it.
Yeah.
Right? And not have to bother with gravity, which is a very expensive part of doing anything outside of this planet. It could go on and on.
Yeah.
Figuring out
how to have control over and harnessing gravity. Like, you hear that's the big quack science thing, right? Anti-gravity machines, right? For a while there it was always perpetual motion.
Sure.
Right? So perpetual motion was the big quack science thing. And then for a long time, and then for, like, when I started getting on the internet back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was anti-gravity devices, right? Everybody was working on an anti-gravity device. And with this research and the things that NASA and all these physicists are doing in trying to figure out how to harness and control gravity, a huge part of SpaceX is building rockets that are capable of carrying large payloads out into space, because that is extremely difficult to do. Like, they actually do a cost per pound analysis, don't they? Like, it costs, like $4 million just to launch this freaking rocket, right? So harnessing gravity and figuring out number one, where it comes from and how it works and how to manipulate it, be just massive. It would be a massive advance for the human race.
Absolutely.
And that would allow us to have like a Star Trek like or Star Wars like environment, right?
Yeah, and I can't even imagine that you and I could sit here and just list for there's there's so many things that you and I wouldn't even think of, right? But because it's a law of nature. It's not some sideline thing that we may or may not need to know about. I mean, it's a law of nature, which I guess, I'm sure there's great things to be done with it. I'm sure there's terrible things to be done with it, right? But like anything else, being able to see it and see how it actually behaves instead of how we think it behaves, having those tangible numbers to work into the existing math already. We do a lot of this math, around gravity.
Yep.
And we just assume that there's complex stuff going on there, and we're doing the best we can.
It's a pretty constant thing. So they can we know it. We just don't know why it is, right? Like we know a lot about gravity. Like we know we can calculate pretty definitely like what the gravity of something is.
You can see it in how we measure it, right? When we talk about other planets having 1.2 gravity. Well, that's 1.2 of our gravity. That's how we measure it. We know what ours does.
Well, that's how
everything else is.
That's how we started
measuring.
Exactly. That's how we started measuring everything, right? Yep. Our thermometers based on our early thermometers was based on boiling point of water and a miscalculation of the boiling point of water. I mean, we the tools get better, right? So we're the gravity discovery is a direct result of our tools getting better. And our ability to go out into the outer space around our planet is the tool we need most right at the moment, right?
No, and I read an article a couple of weeks ago that was just talking about the future for quantum physics is completely hinged on our ability to measure better,
right?
Anything and more precisely. So I thought that was pretty neat. I'd never really looked at it. You always want to know what the thing is.
Right.
You don't think so much about how you measure the thing. That the article really revolved around how important our ability to measure anything is, but especially at a quantum level.
Right.
And our tools are getting better.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Getting better all the time. And I think when we we need to kind of move some of our tools out into space, right? So one of the big things and one of the big breakthroughs they had with the gravity waves was the fact that they had a third site. Now I want to say that third site was a satellite, was it not? Let me take a look. It was.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
It's right on the front page here, man. Let me see.
I was talking to, as you're searching here, I was talking to my youngest son the other day. We were talking about gravity. We were watching something spacey on TV. Him and I like to nerd out to that stuff, but we were talking about gravity. He said talking about putting him in an anti-gravity chamber. He on it, he's 12. And he's a smart kid, very imaginative, but he really thought that was already a thing,
right.
And I was telling him, about how we haven't figured that out yet. The best we can do is the parabolic flights.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think it simulates anti-gravity for 15-20 seconds.
Yeah, the vomit comet.
The vomit comet. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Where they drop you in the plane. I can't find the article, and I'm not going to struggle. But
it was cool that then I think it was the next day I read the article about that really highlighted what we have recently discovered about gravity and its actuality. I was able to share that with it was cool. But for him, he was disappointed we didn't already have one.
Right.
I think he started working on it immediately.
Yeah, right. He was thinking in his head. I was like, all right, I'm gonna figure this shit out.
Yep.
There's a lot of theories out there that about magnetism and gravity, and there's some relation there. That's a lot of the weird edges of science, right?
Fringe science.
Yeah,
for sure.
But there's definitely an effect from that some Russian scientists have shown from a spinning magnetic field. Now, how much deeper it goes than that, I didn't really see, but it's an interesting effect. Like temperature changes, just weird. Kind of like
it gets into the Nazis were researching that bell.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you ever remember.
I never heard about that.
It was it's pretty fringe.
It's pretty fringe.
Which the Nazis were into that fringe science. I mean, stories of them trying to make werewolves and shit so that they could have. They were doing soldiers. All crazy stuff. Well, I suppose it's fairly well documented they created this device called the bell.
Okay.
This was believed to have been, some people believe we confiscated it after winning that war, and some people believe it mysteriously disappeared. But it was along those lines, spinning magnetic fields, and it was supposedly, it was supposed to be something
crazy,
intense, They had to sort of chain it up, you know what I mean?
Then you had stuff like, the Philadelphia experiment that people insist, like, did you hear about that? You saw them. They did a movie and all that stuff about it. They were trying to test radar cloaking, and they like accidentally dropped people through the deck, and all kind of weird stuff happened. You were talking to me right before we started about the hammer.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, so it's referred to as the 400 million year old hammer.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what it is first. Apparently, and this is a little rabbit hole I went down this past few days. Apparently, archaeologists had found a few items that seem to have been trapped as a rock grew around it. Trapped inside, man-made objects trapped inside these rocks that are dated at 380 to 400 million years old. They found at this point a hammer, a threaded screw, an electrical plug, just some really obscure things. And it's really mind-boggling to them. They don't really know what to do with the information.
Is that it, or is that the different one?
No, that's it. That's the 400 million year old.
The London hammer, or the London artifact.
So the way they got the age, well, aside from geologists knowing how rock forms, they're pretty sure there's no other way this could exist in its current state without a rock growing around this hammer. The rock dated in at something at 380 plus million years old, which is where they've estimated the date of this hammer. I'm not sure. I imagine carbon dating from the hammer itself would support that claim. But obviously this is pretty mind-boggling stuff. We got theories of time travel, theories of our great ancestors had a pretty advanced civilization, died out, started again.
They backdated, again, right? They backdated human beings, like modern humans, back to 300,000 years again.
Yeah,
and they keep backdating it. We keep finding skulls and shit like that.
And that's fair, because even at 300,000 years old, that's an anthill compared to 400 million.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So this is what's so mind-boggling. I think everybody would have been all right if it would have been 400,000 years old. they would have been able to wrap their heads around it and said, wow, we had something pretty advanced back then.
Right.
So, and then, of course, because we know that 60,000 years ago, people weren't using iron hammers.
Right.
So, maybe then we can speculate that something catastrophic occurred in between those points, but they don't, it's not even there yet.
Yeah.
It's hard to wrap your head around a 400 million year old hammer. This would have been,
yeah, no doubt.
This would have been a pretty different time on Earth.
Yeah. And then, so you wonder, because that looks like a hammer that could be in anybody's workshop. You know what I mean?
It looks like a hammer that I currently have in my workshop. In fairness, it's an old hammer that I have.
Right.
But it's probably 60, 80 years old.
Right. It's weird.
And that's it. I think, for me, I'm pretty fascinated by the unexplained, and I think if you want to be logical about it, I guess you could say maybe our dating system's wrong, but that's something we've had pretty down pat for a while now. It's carbon dating,
right?
Aging of rocks. I mean, this is science that's been proven over and over again. It's not speculative stuff.
Yeah, I've always seen pictures of this, and I'm going to pull a picture of it up just so that we can throw it up here. Older.
So again, the other thing is it's not on its own sort of a one-off anomaly,
right?
And I'll be honest, I don't know if I believe that these things were found at different sites under similar circumstances, but I don't think they were all found at the same site. But maybe nearby was what I was reading, but
right.
Regionally nearby. I mean, there was a threaded screw, also dating back to the same time.
Right.
And I was actually rather shocked to hear that we've been using threaded screws since they said 400 AD.
Oh, really?
So I figured.
No, that surprises me too.
I honestly figured the screw was a later invention, but not 400 million years ago. And then the electrical plug. This one's a little more controversial.
Yeah, I would say.
But according to what I read about the science, it's no different. So
that's definitely something I would love to look into and do some research on and figure out like what's up.
Right, but you can pull it up, right? You know what I mean? It's also another thing that's there, and you can look at, and I tell you, it looks fucking convincing to me. But it's also apparently been scientifically scrutinized. The owner won't give it up, but he's allowed everybody who wants to study
to look at it. As long
as it takes on no damage, is what I heard.
Oh, that's interesting. Right?
So it's been extensively studied in the same fashion that the other ones have, and they're all in the same little vein of
weird.
What the fuck is going on?
Shit, right? The weird shit emitter. Like, did you hear about the? Have you ever heard about the natural nuclear reactor that existed in like South Africa?
I have heard of it
millions of years.
I've heard of it because I watched a show once that they were studying sort of the thermo effect on the ground. Like this only happens with nuclear stuff, and this is also very old.
Right.
That's all I know about it.
That was a pretty cool thing. It was a natural formation of like uranium or something in the ground that ended up being a nuclear reactor, which I thought was really fucking interesting. But yeah, man. So why don't we talk about some SpaceX stuff?
Yeah, cool stuff.
They had some pretty interesting unveiling this week.
So again, I'm gonna leave it to you to sort of tell what you know. I actually had an alarm set on my phone to watch it live.
Oh, did you?
And I passed.
You
out.
passed. Oh,
yeah, I passed out. And I missed it, and I just haven't gone back. But I was excited to hear it. So
yeah, there were some neat pictures. It was kind of interesting. We had talked last week, and no one knows but us what we talked about. But we had talked about the lander from StarCraft, like the little pod, they need to make the little automated pod that lands on the planet and starts making stuff, right?
Like an automated system that builds upon itself to then build us a little colony before we even get up there.
And so they unveiled their reusable Mars lander, right? And let me just see if I can bring a picture of it real quick. And what you want to bet? What did it look like? It looks like that.
Yeah, this is cool. And I've seen some Aftermath articles. Can they afford the Mars lander, right?
Right.
But this is my first time laying real eyes on it for sure.
That is what I was talking about. Yep. The pod, just land the pod. I don't see people going. I don't know that we should send people first.
Well, it's Elon Musk, so those might not actually be people, right?
Yeah, right.
We don't know what those are.
That's right. I don't know, man. Like, is he? He's got an AI fear though, so I don't think he's going to send robots there. Those look like people in spacesuits.
No, but you would think that I mean, Elon Musk should just hire us, frankly.
Yeah,
Don't give us anything real hard to do.
Yeah, I know.
But we'll hire us to sit around and talk about shit. And then
we'll just make shit up for you guys, and you guys can figure it out. Like we'll draw it, and we'll conceptualize it, and then we'll give it to them, and they can just build it. Right?
We'll be his muse.
That's right. There you go.
We'll be his muse. He can just be inspired by us when he wants to. But listen, this is impressive. I still think an automated system needs to be sent up first, right? And maybe there's just more challenges than a guy here at this table. Maybe there's just more I don't understand about it. But if you got a couple basic fundamental systems set up,
right,
to plug this bitch into as soon as it lands,
yeah,
and, just that little extra edge.
Well, even just pre-programmed stuff, right? So we know enough at this point about Mars. We know. So where curiosity has been, where it is, should be where we start, right? So if this takes place and this rocket touches down, it should touch down in the general vicinity of Curiosity. Let's not cook it, but
sure,
let's,
And this is where you were talking last week about, hey, why don't we use some of that stuff?
Right. We know. Right, we know where it's at. We know where some of these debris fields are of like shit that we've used before. Why can't we reclaim some of that material and use it? The big thing is going to be building the machine that builds the machines, right?
Right.
Did that get lost? That got lost too.
Oh yeah.
The machine that builds the machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go back to that. But so SpaceX is moving us forward, whether we like it or not. Elon Musk has determined that he is going to try his best to at least move a portion of the human race forward, right? Sure. And see, those two guys are them, right? They're on Mars right now.
Yeah. Well,
with their cool little four-wheelers. Did you see these things?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying I wouldn't be one of those guys. I mean, those four-wheelers are pretty rad looking.
Pretty rad, man. That's a pretty rad looking four-wheeler. But yeah, I don't I
could be the equivalent of like the Russian monkey.
Right. Yeah.
That just went up before the humans.
That presses all the buttons and makes sure that we don't
as long
get baked from the sun as soon as we leave the atmosphere.
Didn't work out for that monkey, by the way.
Yeah, it didn't. Not so great. But yeah, I mean, so we get there, and it would be really cool for us to have 3D printers, right?
Mm-hmm.
3D printers,
but
things
really
like
the
that.
Smartest ones ever, too, right? I mean, just fucking advanced 3D printing.
Yeah, I mean, get as close as we could get, right, to being able to build stuff at the molecular level, because we'll get there too. I mean, we're getting there now, but as our tools and I think with our current, just with what we have right now, we could really start getting set up.
Mm-hmm.
We send a ship Mars. It has some automated machinery in it. Now, I understand that I'm sure there's a bad satellite lag between here and there, right? It's like a couple minutes, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, there is. But
how live is Curiosity?
I don't know the exact answer to that, other than I know that it is.
Right. There's a bit of a lag, so you couldn't really do true remote control, but you could do pre-programmed actions, right?
Well, we could do true remote control, but it would take at this point the Chinese cooperation, right? Because they just figured out a way to communicate much faster out in space.
That's true,
right? And of course, they're also considering that tremendously valuable to them, right? But it would take that technology, and I can tell you that what I'm thinking is my train of thought is, good job, China. I mean, for going after it,
right?
Figuring it out. But you're not going to have a patent on it. Someone else is going to figure it out also real soon,
right?
And then you could have some real remote control, but also pre-programming sort of the first few parts of this has set up the
right. But what I'm saying is, with the current technology that we have, without anything else, with just shit that's off the shelf parts, right? We could pre-program a drill bot to just go down a certain depth and over a certain depth, and then spin around in circles for a while and just make a big hole, right? I mean, we could tell it to drill certain, and if it gets stuck, it gets stuck. That's why, that's the thing. At least it got that far, right? At least it got whatever far, right? And if you
you're absolutely right. And I honestly, forget about it a lot. I mean, Elon Musk also about to become the best tunnel builder probably to ever live.
Right.
So using that, I'm sure he's already thought of, hey, let's figure this out here before we move it out there. But you're right.
Yeah.
Dropping a drill bot out of the bottom one of these.
Well, I mean, the disposable ones. I mean, that lander is built so that it can take back off again.
Sure.
Like, that is a ship that goes back and forth. Have you ever watched Cowboy Bebop?
No.
It's a good anime. If you haven't watched it, check it out. But one of their little things that they used to get around was these gates, right? So they'd have a gate at Mars and a gate at Earth, and it would shoot you from gate to gate. And so I look at that thing, and that's what I think of is, the ship that gets you up to the gate, and then the gate shoots you from blah 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 to here to there, right? From Mars to Jupiter or whatever.
That'd be nice.
It'd be pretty cool, right? And then you play the toll at the gate. And I thought I just watched the first episode the other day started watching it with my son because he started to get into the anime. So I'm like taking him to the classics, and that's one of the big classic ones. But anyway, I went off on my own little world there for a minute. But yeah, I think that it's important for us to get out there and learn what we can, because who knows, there could be, like, we have Titan and some other moons around Saturn and Jupiter that could be viable places for us to live with a little effort and terraforming. And I mean, the same thing with Mars. Like, we could spread out, and if we spread out a little bit more into the at least the solar system, I think that the resource constraints of Earth will get easier for people who are on Earth, and I think that
it'll balance up.
Yeah, it'll balance things out a little bit, and when we'll kind of spread ourselves out a little bit. But then we also run the risk of overpopulation, right? So all these people leave, and then all of a sudden there's all this room, so we just start having more babies, right?
Yeah, well, that we do repeat our mistakes for sure.
Well, maybe that's what happened last time.
Yeah.
Right? The guy with the hammer dropped it in the river when he was trying to run to the ship, and he made it, but the hammer didn't, and then we all left, except for a couple, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I've always felt maybe that it's always been my time is God theory.
Right.
Uh, deep thinking a long time ago, I came up with, time was always a strand of fabric, always. It's just at some point the fabric was across it, so time being everywhere, all over, within you, outside of you. Time is God theory. Time is just always been around, and the universe could be on its 14th go, that it just repeats itself. Just resets, and I've had the same thoughts about human beings, God only, we don't know. So many things would get erased in 400 million years with the exception of a hammer, a screw, and a plug.
Yeah, see, that's what's so fascinating to me about it, right? The fact that we find fossils to begin with fascinates me. Like, all of a sudden some rock shatters or chips and there's a freaking outline of a dinosaur in there, and people are like, what the shit is that? Right. Can you imagine some old Viking dude finding he was chipping away at a rock, and all of a sudden there's this dragon in the cave, right?
Yeah.
And he's there because you can see the bone. Right?
But I mean, I don't know. Nature's a complex thing. I think it's a pretty sophisticated way that a sophisticated ball of rock would keep historical record. I mean, it's a lot of it's happenstance, right? I mean, right. They happened to step in that thing right at the right time that we got to see it, millions of years later. But it is pretty ingenious way of keeping record if you're a planet, right? I mean, you're not
I mean,
you're not painting on your own cave walls. You're a planet, right? So you got to do it somehow. I think it's pretty sophisticated.
I think that's definitely an interesting thought. Like, the planet itself keeping its own records by burying everything in stone, right?
I think there's always a gray line between nature and consciousness, and, especially on something as big as a planet that has to stay in so much balance, right? All the time,
so we're gonna go down a really weird road for a minute. So we were talking about the gravity waves and the collapsing waveforms, right? I went into this total universe build mode, right? Where, okay, that sounds really neat. How can I break it? Right? How can I make this so ridiculous that it'll just melt everybody's brain, right? So the road that I went down was, okay, so the premise is that reality itself is just one large waveform collapsing, and that the physical reality that we experience is a dynamic, right? So the physical universe, our matter, is constantly moving through the universe, right? So if you think of our consciousness and you think of time, right? Time and consciousness are our experience as the waveform collapses, right? So moment to moment, probability dictates the reality that you and I experience, right? So if you choose to make a right instead of a left, the waveform collapses differently, right? But it still collapses in the same way as if, so the waveform will split at every confluence of
every conceivable
conscious
move.
choice. Conscious choice, though. Perceivable choice, right? Because of the observer effect, right? What we expect the outcome to be affects the outcome. And let me just throw my disclaimer up. This is all just crazy crap that floats around in my head, right? This is not based on any kind of scientific fact other than I read a cool article and then my brain went when I started coming up with crazy stuff, right? So our experience of reality is whatever we are understanding this waveform as it collapses, right? So the thing that we are, right, in here, this consciousness, is experiencing the collapse of this waveform, right, in a linear fashion, because that is the way that it is. That's the way that we can understand it in a physical reality, because that is the only way that we can understand how that waveform collapsing is actually happening.
Just interesting. Means does that mean your future would be still waveform?
That means
behind you a little bit, or
your future is in front of you, and it's your future is in front of you, and it's still a waveform. And the choices that you make dictate how that waveform collapses for your particular version of reality.
So we each have our waveform, or are we all part of the same waveform, or is it yes?
Yes. It's one big one
breaking into
that is made up of millions and trillions and, you know, whatever number you can think of that's not enough number of other waveforms. So think of it like the galaxy is, or reality itself is this nebulous object, right? As it is observed, coalesces as we move through it, and as we experience it.
Now, would each waveform be a dimension, or is it
I think
encompassing of even those?
Well, then the question of what consciousness, then you enter into what the question of consciousness, right? What is consciousness? How are we witnessing the collapse of this waveform? Are we points along the waveform collapsing it? Like, are we pushing this forward by experiencing it consciously through the observer effect?
Right.
The other little twist in this story is, right, that they're saying, well, if reality is a collapsing waveform, that it can collapse in two different directions. Meaning that as your history is written, it collapses backwards, right? So us observing this and
mind blown
as we are experiencing this, right?
Yeah.
And as we find out what the probability of the past is, it collapses that waveform into a physical reality in that direction.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I like. So I don't know. I like the way you think, but it is, you know, again, you know, it proves, in a sense, right? It proves the possibility of all of these weird things that might come out of us now understanding collapsing waves at matter, you know, and all of this stuff that we're figuring. This is the next big theory, right? Maybe you just landed something.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I told a friend of mine, my friend out in Arizona, and he's actually an educated person.
He told you to get off the absence.
Yeah, he was like, all right, man, that's interesting and all, but you have no proof and it's a wild theory, but it's cute, right? He's like educated in philosophy and stuff like this, and he's just like, yeah, okay, fascinating. You're full of shit. But
I mean, look, we were sitting at this table. The odds of you being absolutely correct are
slim to none.
But there was a lot of people who were called crazy for things that turned out to be, if not fully true, but partially, right?
Well, it makes an interesting story,
possible,
right?
Right?
Yeah, and it makes an interesting story. So
that's the way your head works.
Yeah, but you think about that, right? So think about that for a minute. We're going to walk down this path for a little bit longer, and then we'll go somewhere else. But, okay, so let's say my wild, insane theory is correct, right? In that world, that reality is this collapsing waveform, right? This idea. So that makes some of these really woo-woo things not as woo-woo, right? So this whole mindfulness thing, right, where you should be conscious of the decisions that you're making and not just rely on instinct. Don't just necessarily go with it, but kind of keep open to the possibility of what's happening now, right?
It integrates a whole bunch of stuff that's not really considered courtesy, right? I mean, these things that we don't have to be
knowing.
We're not sure if there's a lot of value from a scientific standpoint of being courteous, right, or if it's just a distraction.
But I think there's also a component of it of like kind of quote unquote being aware of how all the little pieces fit together, right? And so we take this, right, and then we apply it, right? So your mindfulness changes the probability of certain things happening, right? So you become more mindful of walking on the sidewalk a certain way, right? And it actually ends up leading you down a different street one day.
One that you don't get hit by a fucking car.
Exactly. So then all of a sudden, your whole reality changed based on your navigation of it, right? So, for instance, I've had this kind of idea in my head for a long time that this particular version of me is just experiencing this particular version of my reality, right? So if I'm conscious of
multiple Rick theory,
right? So if I'm conscious that there's multiple me's, right, but that we're all connected via whatever mechanism, that I want to experience this reality. So I try to steer myself there, right? And so me being the nut job that I am, right, I'm like thinking real hard, right? I want to be in the world. I want to be in the world where this election, right? So I did this before. I want to be in the world where Gary Johnson wins the presidency, right? And so I tried real hard to push myself into that reality, right? Well, apparently it was not a very probable reality because I ended up in this one where Trump got elected president, which is still an improbable reality.
Cool.
But it's the one I ended up in. I just missed the mark. I didn't shoot far enough and ended up in the wrong one. I always
wonder about that. The infinite experiences. I mean, I guess in my head, there's a void about this theory that it's really tied into the butterfly effect,
right?
Unless I'm understanding this wrong, but you go back in time, you take a leak somewhere, and you come back and everybody's got two heads.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? This whole thing, I always wonder these, I guess if there's infinite possibilities, then I guess everything sort of exists. There's the two-headed version of it somewhere. And I don't even think so void so much as that, it's hard to wrap your head around this whole stuff, this whole Infinite Andes thing, right?
Right.
But, I actually watched one of my favorite shows, and I know it's kind of dumbed down science, but Morgan Freeman's Through the Wormhole for me is just a fun sit and watch. I don't watch a lot of TV, so
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's cool. I mean, it's sciencey enough that my wife can't stand it.
Okay, well, you're probably right up my alley.
And she calls me a nerd for watching it, so it's sciencey enough for sure. I mean, it's all it is really. But the episode I watched a couple of days ago was the theory that we are a simulation of our distant ancestor of ourselves, right? I mean, just ourselves playing a game with ourselves that is playing out in infinite ways. Now, this is much more of a programmable simulation. This is 3D virtual reality to somebody's watching us. There's an observer watching their games play out, right? it's a far-fetched theory. I'll admit,
I don't know
but
that it's that far-fetched.
it's not the first time I've heard about it either. You
No,
know,
yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing, like the simulation theory that we're all just kind of.
I believe that. There was the kook that the big end of the world scare with the Mayans.
The dude? Yeah, 2012. December 21st, 2012.
And this guy sort of was this leader of these believers that they were all, that this was a computer simulation. And his big thing was at a certain time on the 12th, he was going to jump off a cliff and a portal would open and he would
Did he do it?
Escape from the game. Not surprisingly, I think he called off sick that day.
Did he?
Right. He missed the jump.
He didn't go for the portal, huh?
Well, he showed the world he was full of shit completely.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not the first time I've heard this theory. That was his big thing. His big thing was we're all part of a computer simulation being run by somebody, by something. But it was a pretty interesting episode of the show, and I understand where a lot of it's built from, because it's as hard to conceptualize that as all these other things playing out, right? Because it's not stuff that it's too new for all of us to be like, oh yeah, duh. Well, that makes sense. There's infinite me's out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
duh. I mean, I felt like that's the way it was. Well, nobody's gonna say that, right?
Because there's different reactions to that. You know what I mean? Like everybody has a different reaction to the idea that they are not the only them. Right.
And Rick and Morty fans, they get it immediately.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, yeah, duh, we know, dude.
Right.
You know, but
I look at it in a different way. So I talk about probability a lot because I think probability is basically the mechanism of the universe, right? So when you get it all down and you look at the bare metal, the one rule I think that kind of rules them all is probability, right? So we're going to go back to the waveform world for a minute, right? And we're going to look at how probability affects that and how it affects something like consciousness, right? So my thought is that each individual little waveforms that we are, right? We're experiencing this particular consciousness, which is in and of itself a waveform, or the witnessing of the waveform collapsing, right? And we have some conscious control over the probability of that waveform collapsing. So I love it as a tree, right? So in the center of the tree, there's the probabilities that are very high, right? So it's very thick because there's a lot of...
I'm going to shit myself as a baby. I'm going to at some point learn how to eat.
That's right. And those are all very thick because the probability of you doing anything other than eating or shitting or crying is very low, right? But then it branches off because your decisions get more complex. And as they get more complex, it kind of dwindles out into these little paths everywhere, right? But some of these paths are highly improbable. So that version of you feels like a dream. When you go to sleep at night and you feel those probabilities leaking into your consciousness, these little tiny twigs, the little veins at the end of the leaf, that kind of just spark out like highly, highly improbable things that send you down these weird paths of whatever you're going to do. Some of them curl back in on themselves and they reach back into the trunk, and then some of them go out and end, with you doing stupid asinine things and improbably, dying, right?
We've talked about this before, and I really like the visual, and I think honestly, it makes a lot of sense. So kudos on that. I think it's a great way to explain some pretty complex shit,
right?
I mean, I don't know. Begs the question though. In that center trunk, when I'm pretty certain I'm going to shit myself as a baby, I'm going to eventually learn how to eat Cheerios first. And I'm going to cry until I learn to laugh and all these things, where does how does mom and dad's tree cross there? At that point, I'm not making a lot of decisions, right?
Mm-mm.
So
but you're changing their decisions.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. I mean, it's the because it's not just a tree. It's essentially comes back down into this like thick trunk of probabilities. I'm going to shit myself as an old person.
Right.
I'm going to forget how to eat.
It all comes full circle.
Die, right? I mean,
it's more like a tumbleweed than a tree. It kind of curls back in on itself, real bushy like.
Yeah.
You know. But I have this series that I'm writing on Reddit, this weekly series, and so it's about death, because death has always been one of those things that has really, really intrigued me. Because I don't want to ever have to experience it, is one of the reasons it really intrigues me.
Jay is certainly a seeker of the fountain of youth.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. I really like this existence, whether it pain with all the pain and suffering and bullshit nonsense that go along with it. I really love being alive, and I would prefer not to be.
In the same vein, real quick, I'm waiting until I'm the best looking I will ever be before coming immortal. You know what I mean? I don't think I want to pause it here. You know what I'm saying? I'm just hoping.
Man, honestly, I don't give a shit. I'll pause it wherever. As long as I can pause it, I don't care. Because I really just, I think there's so much to see and so much to experience and so many people to meet. And, my friends used to mess with me when I was in college and we would go out drinking illegally. I would be the one lagging behind everyone talking to all the vagrants, right? So the dudes like hanging out in Baltimore City, just chilling, like homeless dudes, I would be the one to strike them up a conversation and like talk to them and get their story and listen. And it was cool because I got all these different stories. Every single person you meet and every single person that you'll ever come in contact with has a really interesting story, at least one. Mine usually involves shitting myself, but most other people's stories are much better than mine and don't involve shitting themselves. But everybody has just at least one really just fascinating thing that has happened to them. And I look at that as like, I want to know what all those stories are. Like, I want to hear what all those stories are. And then I want to tell them again. I want to kind of say, all right, well, Rachel had this interesting, fascinating part of her life. I'm going to tell people about that interesting, fascinating part of her life, but I'm not going to tell them about Rachel because that's Rachel's private thing. But I can bring it to other people and say, look, this experience happened to this person and this is what could happen. And I love just that idea that there's so many humans and they have such an interesting series of stories to tell,
like cross-pollination almost.
Yeah, right? I mean,
the flower doesn't really care where the pollen came from, but it helped it out a little bit.
Yeah, right? I love that. I love being able to experience all these little stories. And so I am bound and determined to live as long as possible, just so that I can at least get as many of those as I can get out.
Yeah, no, I it's cool. I sit with one human being for a long time, every day of my life and my career, and I agree. So the part that keeps it from you do get to meet these people, you do get to hear these stories, you get this completely different outlook, which is huge, because we have this sort of natural tendency to think everything revolves around us, right? I mean, we hear about self-centeredness. I don't think we become self-centered. I think we start self-centered and then become not self-centered if we're lucky enough, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a matter of degree, right? We grow up coming out of the womb little sociopaths, and then as we get older, we learn to not be such.
Well, it's humbling. I mean, everybody talks about humility, and I think it's important as a character trait for sure. But you know, it's humbling to put yourself in someone's shoes, right? And that's what you're doing almost when you're hearing these stories. You just you're like, you're imagining. I mean, I'm not talking about this frou stuff. I'm talking about the mechanics going on in your brain as you're getting told one of these stories.
Oh yeah,
you're self-centered enough to put yourself there.
Yeah,
but you get to experience more than your life will allow that way, and I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think when I was growing up, we moved around a lot, and I think that that experience has pushed me to realize that things are very different everywhere, that everyone is different everywhere. Sure. Like, we all have a lot of the same goals and wants, and we need to concentrate on those commonalities. But also, we need to think also, the smallest minority is the minority of one, right? The individual is the smallest minority, right? And each and every one of us has a completely different perspective on life than the other, because no one has experienced your life the way you have.
True.
And all those little individual stories are just...
But it's interesting, though, what we were just talking about, talking to other people. If I grew up the way I grew up, if my best friend grew up in a completely different situation and I spent a lot of time with that human being,
mm-hmm.
I carry through my life his experiences.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not in a direct form, right? I may not remember that exact moment.
Right, but you carry your perspective on his experiences. And it's really important.
And, that the infinite levels of branching out from that,
right.
Is almost sort of interesting on a second layer kind of.
How many times do you guys fight and make up, right? And then maybe this time you fought and like this one made up, but this one didn't, and it led to a completely different road, right? Yeah, we started to talk about this thing with the death, and I wrote the way that the mechanism works in the story is he has them go through a door, right? And nobody knows what's on the other side of the door but me. I know what's on the other side of the door. I don't know that I'll ever tell. But let's just say that it definitely ties into the my whole theory of the soul and what the soul is. And,
I'm gonna get you drunk one day, and then you're gonna tell me. I'm just saying. One day I'm gonna get you hammered, and I'm gonna be pretending I'm drinking vodka the whole time. And when you're shit hammered, I'm gonna be like, all right, what's behind the fucking door?
Right. I think if I said it, I think that anyone who's reading the story right now would be really angry with me.
I understand.
But yeah, no, it's the story is starting to move forward. This is something I started years and years and years ago, right?
Well, really, the story's kind of born from your thing with death. I'm guessing, right?
Oh yeah, it So I had this. I drive a lot, so I drive back and forth to Baltimore all the time, and so I got a good 2 hours in the car every day. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just let my mind kind of just wander, because it's really good therapy to just, and at the time, right then, I wasn't even listening to the radio or anything like that. It was an hour of silence of me driving down the road and an hour of silence. And so I got this idea because I was driving down the road and I saw this accident almost happen, and it just sparked in my head what would have happened. And I just, this scenario started. The movie started. It's weird for me. Things will spark off little movies in my head. And so I had the movie in my head of this guy dying, and then he becomes an agent of death, right? And so I sat down and I started writing it out, and I didn't really like how it was turning out, and I started writing on it, and I kept different versions, and then it evolved. And then I was like, well, it's pretty good. Let me see if I'll post it on Reddit. So I've been posting it on Reddit intermittently. and just started getting serious about it now. So I sat down and I'm like, what am I going to do with this, right? Because I could go on forever with him just, it starts out with him picking up souls, right? So Ben will go pick up a soul and he'll say, all right, here's your doorway. He has to get them to realize that they're dead. These are people who don't realize they're dead, and guide them to the doorway. And that's all he's been told. He's like, this is what you do. Bye. So Ben doesn't have any fucking clue what's going on. All he knows is that he's supposed to go through this doorway with a name on it. And when he gets through that doorway, that will be the person who's waiting for him. And he is to guide them to their doorway. And then he leaves. Goes on to the next one. And that's what he does over and over again. Until he meets another quote-unquote reaper, for lack of a better term, right? And he learns that there's way more to it. So now the story is starting to progress and it's starting to get a little thicker, right? And so I had to sit down, right? Because I have this weekly thing now, and I'm beholden to myself to create this weekly story. And it doesn't have to be long, but I have to at least admit. And I have to give somebody a little bit of satisfaction because there's one or two people that read it. So for the one or two people that read it, I feel this responsibility to continue. So I had to sit down the other day and I'm like, okay, I'm running out of material, like stuff. I gave myself a nice big buffer. And I'm like, I think I finally have to figure out what the hell's going on, right? Because up until about a month ago, I had no idea where this was going to go.
Kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I had no idea where it was going to go. I had a vague idea of what I kind of like when I first started it, because I started this story like 4 or 5 years ago. I started writing it, and like started writing it, and then realized, well, this story could actually do well on its own. So if it became a little bit more complex, so I started writing it to try to be a little bit more complex with it. And then I was just like, yeah, that sucks. And I just didn't like the direction that it was going in, so I just shelved it and worked on something different. So I wrote the other book, Seeds of Terra, and put that up and finished that. So now I'm back to the Reaper thing. And I think that the Reaper thing is going to stay a series on Reddit, but I do have a really good story arc planned.
Awesome.
So it does have an end, and I do know where it's going now.
How does someone find it on Reddit?
All right, so if you want to read any of the stories that I've written anywhere, my Twitter's 11dog, my name on Reddit's 11dog, anything with the words 11dog on it, most likely me. So on Reddit, I write in the RHFY subreddit, and that's all of my stories are on there under 11dog. I originally put so Seeds of Terra was originally a writing experiment. Can I write from an alien point of view, right? And so I wrote the first episode on Reddit, just kind of like, let me see if I can do this. It was really super short. And then people wanted more. So I was like, all right, well, as long as people keep asking me for more, I'll keep writing.
Good motivating factor.
It is, and it really actually solidified the writing thing for me, because it allowed me to be, and now the word's completely gone, to be accountable to at least somebody, right? And for me, letting somebody down is a really strong motivator.
The deeper you dig, feedback is exciting.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Until it's not, but even when it's not, then you kind of get over that and realize that you grow. I mean, we're both artists.
Yeah,
you're an author, as a visual artist. I post my work every day.
Right. You have
pretty pure. I don't convince anybody of anything.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Right. Yeah.
Let me know what you think.
There's got to be some There's got to be some tension there, man, because you're putting it on there, and it ain't going away. That's there.
Right. And what I found is when I have piece of visual art, go. I suppose my version of viral, right? My version of viral isn't millions. My version of viral is thousands,
right?
The better one does, the more you brace yourself for the negative, right? Because that's the law of averages.
Yeah.
You know, you send it out, 20,000 people see it, you're gonna get some people don't like it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is my favorite thing about art, though. It's like asking, would you rather 1,000 people hate your story or 100 people love it? You know, it's a trick question because the point is 1,100 people paid attention.
Yeah,
right.
1,100 people read it.
That's what art is, right?
Right.
It's not always meant to be cushy. It's not always meant to make you feel warm and fuzzy. It's creating something from nothing,
right?
And then putting it out there or not. But the purpose, I think, is to share,
right,
art.
Yeah.
And I love that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that part of what I do. and what you do. I mean, just the fact that you're throwing it out there, opening yourself up.
Well, it's something I've wanted to do. It's something that I wanted to do for a really, really long time, and then it all really happened organically. It was one of those things where a lot of the best things I think that happen to me are things that I do on a whim, right? So I've been trying to listen to the universe a little bit more, right? Goes along with the whole mindfulness, collapsing waveform nonsense, right? Just be open to possibilities and probabilities, right? So I've been trying to be a little less planned and rigid, and so as part of the exercise, I follow little whims I have every now and again. I was in the kitchen. It was before we started this, and before you got here, and I was making myself a cup of coffee, and I have Alexa right by the coffee machine in the kitchen. So I said, I was doing my coffee, and then I looked up, and the Echo Dot's right there in front of my face, and I'm like, Alexa, sing me a song. And she actually sang me a song, and it was a really weird, creepy song.
No kidding.
About Alexa, like circuits, and I was laughing too hard to understand a lot of it. And then my wife was like, "What did you do?" Like she was so kind of, I think, shocked and pissed that it worked. She was like, "What are you doing, man?"
You might not know. You're gonna know now. But my wife has a pretty legit fear of sort of robot uprising.
Does
right?
she?
Like legit. You won't find an Alexa in our house, right? But the talking house thing's cool, and it's interesting. So she didn't just sing a song. She made a song.
Well, I mean, she didn't make a song. That was her pre-programmed response to me asking her to sing a song. But it was an Alexa song, and it was in her voice. So like, it wasn't like a pre-recorded station or something.
I was reading an article on AI the other day, and it had mentioned that we've been utilizing AI for a long time. So that Google uses an artificial intelligent format to do what Google does.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure about if the Alexas were AI or if they were voice recognition pre-programmed stuff.
Yeah,
it does a Google search essentially.
It does.
Right?
It's got some capabilities. I mean, there's definitely. I think it's a dipping of the toe in the water. You know what I mean?
So, but if they're linked, I mean, it's quite possible one day Alexa wake up. Could be. Start feeding you stuff instead of you feeding it, right?
There's nothing to say that it wouldn't be doing that now. I mean, we could run in circles all day long. Like, if the internet is conscious and it's responsible for fake news,
sure,
right?
Sure.
I mean, you had all those algos at Facebook that were feeding a certain, and then you had the chatbots that got racist immediately.
Yeah, now for the second time.
Yeah, I mean, they get
time,
racist
dude.
Immediately.
Yeah, AI tends to be quite racist. I mean, this is the second time this thing did it, right?
Yeah, but I think
the first time, and I said, whoa, pulled the plug.
Yeah, I think that
redid some stuff.
I think there's some shenanigans there, man.
You think?
Yeah. I think that there's definitely some gaming of the system by some individuals that are all near and dear to our heart, right? Like the 4chan guys and B and Anonymous like to do things like Bodie McBoatface and shit like that. So like they could be racist because they were getting fed a bunch of racist shit from all those dudes on 4chan.
True, yeah.
So
yeah,
you can't discount the possibility of fuckery.
It also sort of speaks to we don't really understand how a machine learns. I watched.
Or we could also say that every system will be gamed.
Well,
right?
Absolutely, right? Yeah. It's I mean, look, it's the same as all around, right? Nobody believes in Sasquatch because no one can seem to get a fucking clear photo of it, right? They're all fucking blurry.
Or a dude in an ape suit running across the desert, right?
Right, so but it's kind of all the same thought process, I watched a cool video the other day, and again, it's a video, you always got to take that with a grain of salt, right? I mean, you're watching a cool video. This could be faked easily, right?
I got something for you, man.
To real quick finish my point, I watched a robot, I think it was opening a jar.
Right.
Rather goofy little fucking thing. It was not really so little, but it looked awkward, had some weird joints going on,
right?
And some what was interesting about the video, we weren't watching it open a jar, we watched it learn how to use its fingers first.
Then so like progression.
So this thing right off the bat is this is gonna look silly, but this thing right off the bat is just trying to it's fucking hitting itself in the head and shit, trying to figure out what it can do.
Right.
But you watch this thing within a matter of 5 minutes become quite controlled.
Right.
And open a jar and like looking for another jar to open. It was pretty interesting to watch this progression of floppy robot to I now know I'm supposed to open this jar, and it was really, really neat to watch.
It is, because and then we were talking was it last episode that we completely lost the muscle?
Yeah.
The artificial muscle, right? So then
we're gonna have to bring absolutely.
So then with the robotics, cool. Right? What's important about that is with the new advancement of this thing called artificial muscle, it's a low power movement system for machines. And by making it low power, it enables us to have an actual robot that doesn't need a huge battery pack and a battery cell, so they become lighter and more flexible.
Absolutely.
So then the little skittery thing that you saw becomes even smaller and more compact and kind of, I guess, more ergonomic. Sure. So they can trot up and open the jar and learn its legs and skitter around, and
I think it's creepier to watch that way. By the way,
absolutely.
Right? I mean, watching a clunky robot, right? I mean,
watching something learn is difficult.
But the artificial muscle is really, really cool thing, and I'm really excited and slightly terrified to see it progress.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing I'm going to say about the artificial muscle, and then I'm going to move on to something else, is if you haven't seen Westworld, you should definitely watch Westworld, because it is HBO. I think it rivals Game of Thrones on how good it is, and it'll give you kind of
I haven't watched it either, guys, but it's been
really
highly
cool, and you
recommended.
should
I just don't have HBO, but I will find it somewhere else, I suppose.
I'll get it for you. So you were talking about faking video.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So I saw something, and I don't know if I've mentioned it to you, but I saw it a couple weeks ago. I want to say it was maybe even a couple months ago. This new program by Adobe. And what it does is it takes audio and stitches audio together. So if they were to take this podcast and they were to take my voice or your voice and run enough of it through this program that they have, this app they've developed, they could actually type out a speech for the program to read in your voice, and it would be fairly indistinguishable from
fun and dangerous.
Yes, from something that you actually said. It's going to say in your voice what I type on the keyboard.
Wow.
And so when you think about that and you think about a simple Snapchat filter, right, where I could wear your face and speak in your voice, and that's not something that's not a pipe dream, man. That's not on the horizon. That is here.
Yeah, that's pretty scary shit. But we're gonna have to come up with something really clever for verification, certification purposes, right?
I believe so.
The YouTube stuff, YouTube or things like it. Really giving this cool outlet to creative people. No matter what their intentions. I mean, you're pretty creative to come up with some of this stuff that certainly there's plenty of hoaxes out there. I'm not a guy who believes everything I read.
Right.
But sources sometimes aren't enough, and you I think this is gonna I have apps on my phone that allow me to do better special effects than
the original Star Wars, right?
Star Wars. I can do it on my phone right now. It's really easy.
So think about this, right? So I saw this commercial because I don't watch a lot of TV, but every once in a while, like the kids will throw up the TV and we'll watch Cartoon Network for a little while. And, it's full of commercials. I saw a commercial for this. It's this app and this gun that you can get. And so you put the app on your phone, and then you slide your phone into the gun, and you can see augmented reality, and you can shoot each other. So, like, I was thinking about getting it, the boys, so that they could go out in the backyard. And like you get ammo, and you can see, if you look through your phone, you can like see like different things.
Augmented reality laser tag.
It is, and it's pretty freaking awesome.
That sounds pretty freaking awesome.
It's probably really freaking expensive, so we probably won't see it for a couple of years. But
I'm so excited for all that stuff to start really rolling out.
I know.
And I'm hesitant to get into it yet on any larger scale than like Google Cardboard, but
right. Man, virtual reality.
As it starts to really come around, I'm gonna get into it deep. I think I'm so fucking fascinated by it.
Can you imagine, as an author writing a book, or as an artist painting a scene, and then someone being able to walk into that scene, or be able to walk into that book and experience, even from a third person perspective, what you've created in there?
One of my largest levels of excitement when it comes to this thing is the potential for art, right? And these things exist already, these 3-dimensional art programs. You put on your headset, and that you're not transported to another world. You're exactly where you were when you put on your headset, except you go like this and you paint.
Right.
And you paint behind you.
I would love it, man.
And from a visual, for me, it's like any other medium. I'm not sure I'm gonna love it, but you better be damn sure I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
I watched I guess there's also a way to record these sessions, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not too hard to figure out how to do. I don't know how to do it, but watched a guy sculpt a massive human head out of like green wireframe paint, and it just existed and was there, and you can save it and download it and share it and do whatever. But it's this really weird thing for me. I can't wait to try that for the first time.
No, I mean it's going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to the day when I can write a story and feed it to the VR tank, and the VR AI figures it out. All right, you're on a spaceship. This is what the spaceship looks like. This is where it's going. This is what sun it's at. Let's build a procedurally generated universe based on these rules.
That's it. We're going to have to learn how to keep up. Oh, speaking of keeping up with things in our industries, I am desperately trying to get involved with the medical indicating tattoos.
Oh, did you see that?
I saw the certainly for viewers who don't know, my wife is a extremely brittle diabetic. Something we've been dealing with. She's been a brittle diabetic since she was 10. We've been married 16 years now, so I am absolutely a diabetes expert at this point.
Right.
It's a matter of life and death sometimes. But I was very aware pretty early of the blood sugar level indicating tattoo. So as everything does, nothing stays there. So they've now expanded this technology, which is all still in test phase right now. This is in order for me to get involved right now, which I'm planning on trying.
Yeah,
I have to contact the Harvard University team that is
actually doing
this,
it,
right?
yeah,
and say, hey, look, my wife's a type 1 diabetic.
And I'm a tattoo artist.
Pretty competent tattoo artist,
right. Yeah, pick me,
right? To be involved. This is fascinating to me, especially when I saw, it's this weird mix of sort of bio art, and it because from a tattoo artist standpoint, the blood sugar indicator one, that was a really, really cool idea. It was a terrible fucking tattoo.
Right.
I'm immediately going, make this look cool too.
Right.
Right. And then, it's now able to read more than blood sugar level.
Right.
Right. And then I think that's going to expand. So for me, you want to mix a little bit of science into my industry? Fucking sign me up, because I'm picturing half sleeves that tell you the state of your different parts of you. So, right?
I mean, I'll be your first experimentation, man. I'll do the blood sugar tattoo, and you could just do a vine with leaves on it, right? Because it turns from green to brown, right?
Yep.
So when your leaves turn brown, you need to go get something to eat.
That's my point, right?
Yeah.
Is, I understand from a science standpoint, art, I think it's more appreciated than, but it's not some...
Yeah, it's not some push.
Right.
They want to make sure it works. Their idea is to make sure.
And then they need to get it into my hands.
Right.
Once they realize it works.
Cool, right? And then you make it look cool, and it'll be...
I have nothing to add to their process of discovery.
Right. But you do have something to add, though. Like, we'll see what's more likely, though, people to put this tattoo on them that not only adds to the way... Like, for me, tattoo adds... I love the tattoos that you've done for me. I love them. They make me feel better about being me. So for me, tattoos are my outward expression of, I like this because this makes me feel more me. So the idea of medical tattoos and the idea of tattoos that can do things like, the little circuit board ones that they're talking about that carry the current, and the idea that I could have a tattoo that tells me what time it is, like right here on the the inside of my thumb, so I can just look at it and say, all right, well, it's 5 o'clock. I just love the idea of that, man. That's awesome.
Well, and for me, a lot of times, even with my rather fluid imagination, you know, my industry hasn't changed a lot in thousands of years, right? I mean, you take something sharp, you jam it into a skin cell, and you make it a different color,
right?
You know,
Yeah,
and that's it,
yeah.
right? Now, the art's changed, a lot of stuff's changed, but to have a practical reason to do it as well,
yeah,
is a whole. I could see myself branching out, you know, in the future, even not maybe not quite solely into medical stuff, but really diving deep into medical stuff.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I'm really excited to watch this technology progress, and you better believe I've already sent an email. So,
have you really? Good. That's awesome. I'm excited about it too, because I saw that article, and the first person I thought it was you, and I was really super excited about it, and we hadn't talked about it, but I was hoping that you would be excited about it, because it's right up your alley of especially when they use the blood sugar, example of the tattoo that can definitely like tell you like right away, like, and you don't have to prick your finger or anything. You just look at the tattoo and it says you need to,
and what better data than my wife, who's on board, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And she being such a brittle diabetic, and mind you, she's a very responsible one. She's not she doesn't slack, she doesn't not take care of herself. It's just her severity of this condition,
right?
Is all over the place. It's a pendulum swing, and so she would be such a great source for data, and she's into it. So hopefully it works out that we get to play around with some of this stuff soon.
That would be very cool. I would be number 2 in line for something like that, just for the sense of having it, because I think it's awesome.
I've thought it out already. I'm sure I have to stay under pretty strict Harvard rules on this for their own organization purposes of the data, but it'd be really, really interesting. And I'm totally excited that this might be something. Right?
So then, can you imagine just walk down the road for a second and all the things that you could do with this if you could get it to change chemically with like moods and emotions and all kinds of different chemical changes.
One of the first thoughts I had, this is for those of you who don't know, I play a lot of video games. I'm a large hairy video game playing child, but no, I mean you play these games, you watch these movies, and you see an alien species, and they just have these markings all over them, these tattoos all over their head, and that's immediately where I went to this sort of practical reason, this sort of display of, hey, by the way, your liver's doing something really stupid right now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And you look at the diagnostic
my liver's
panel.
Acting up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you got the diagnostic panel on the inside of your arm, and it just tells you, like, all right, well, if that one turns brown, you better go eat something.
So the next video I saw, sort of past the one you shared with me, which, mind you, that week I think I had about 14 people share that. To my page. So the chances of me missing that were slim. You see something once and it's like, all right. You see it twice, it's like, all right, now I'll finally fucking watch it. But the second video I saw was multiple designs that seemed to have been linked together. Maybe Current did sort of, or something did sort of pass from one to the next to power each one of these designs that sort of changed.
Oh, that's cool.
So for me, I immediately get into this, how do we wire this bitch up? How do we really utilize it? I mean, my head immediately started to spin. Thought it was just really cool. Hopefully I get to be a part of it. I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, at some point you will, because I would think that at some point, like, I'm sure we're not the only ones that see the potential in this. I think it's a pretty big potential thing. And I think that anything like that's that easy to utilize and that gives that much of a benefit that easily is going to end up in our hands one way or another, not too distant future. So, like, even if you don't get the first time around, I'm sure it's coming your way regardless.
So there's that part of me that wants to make it look really cool, and of course that's a big driving force. But I'm equally fascinated by utilization of the technology on people who never desire to have a tattoo. Right? What's this going to look like? You know, is this going to be square? You ever pee on a stick and see which color it changes to see if I don't know.
Yeah, can you make it look? Can you make it look decent? Can you make it look not necessarily medical in nature or whatever?
If I'm, these home drug kits, right? You pee on the stick and it changes color if you're hot for something. But I visualize a series of medical squares down an arm, that will change in combination. To tell a doctor about something even very specific, right? You've now been diagnosed with this. Your best course of treatment at this point is going to be this tattoo that's going to look like this, and it's going to change colors, and you're going to report to me every time it changes, and we're going to kind of go from there. We're going to gather data about your condition that way.
Or you're going to scan it with your app every day.
Or you're going to scan it with, but for me also, I'm very intimate with the tattoo process, and this is not we're not inkjet printers, and human beings are not a stable canvas.
Right.
So, the insight I have as to how tattoos change, progress over time makes me wonder about this technology. Is there something they are doing to prevent degradation over time? And if so,
can I utilize that?
Can we utilize that outside of the medical tattooing, right? So this could be something that feeds both ways.
Yeah.
I would imagine, a Harvard team of scientists developing a technology. They're going to have already gone down the path of what is this going to look like in 20, 30 years, which is something I say every single day of my life.
Right. How can we create more stable?
Right. So what happens to the color changing element, right?
Right.
When people say I'm pretty good at tattooing, right? Mm-hmm. I don't go around saying that a lot.
Right. Other people do.
But I can't stop time.
Right.
I can't stop biological processes, right? So when I do a very crisp, clear tattoo on you, and you know this, our viewers might not, maybe they do. Skin cells continue to multiply. They don't give a shit if they have ink in them or not.
Right.
Right? And this is really the most damaging process a tattoo goes through in its life. I can't stop a cell from multiplying. In theory it would die, and it's a process. It has to do it.
Right.
So when people say a tattoo fades or it whatever, really it's migrating, right? That one cell that used to be black turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 8, eventually turns into 16.
Yeah.
This is, so for me, I'd love to know, I'd love to just have 5 minutes to look at their research on that aspect of their invention.
Right. Right. How the stability holds up over time.
Look, I'm a deep thinker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an artist.
Right.
I'm not sure I'm a tremendously intelligent guy.
Right.
I mean, Harvard, has this thing about them. They're smart people.
Well, and now that there's a practical purpose for these, right? I'm sure that the more research,
this level of mind gets involved with my industry.
Right. What happens when the medical profession itself gets involved in the industry and starts to realize, okay, well, this isn't something that's fringe anymore. This is something that actually has serious benefit for people. How does the industry change, and how does the methodology change, and how does the technology change, and how do our tools improve now that there's more skin in the game, which is kind of what it comes down to for all the stuff that we work into.
Look, man, I want to know what I want to know the things that probably can't be known right now.
Yeah.
Right? I want to know how much that ink's going to cost. I want to know, can I offer a client an upgrade on their green?
Right. And make it.
You want regular ink at my regular rate?
Right.
Or do you want medical ink at this other rate to cover the costs and everything else? And then this leopard hiding in the jungle, different parts of it are going to change, and you're going to know
how you feel based on.
You're going to know what those changes mean.
Right.
You know, I mean, these curiosities, right? And it's exciting for me. I don't get a lot of industry news.
I know,
that's exciting,
man.
Right?
That's a pretty cool development.
So,
but listen, I think I've got to run.
Yeah,
man. So I think we're gonna cut it there, and
all right.
We'll figure out what we're gonna talk about next week. Maybe some. We'll see what happens.
Well, look, great session, man.
Right.
We are Locke and Noon. We're saving the world and keeping this table from floating away.
All right. Have a good one.
Later.